Magyantimirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam nangyate girim yatkripatanam vande Shri Gurudena Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. Thank you again for joining. So we are in the first chapter of the fifth canto, and this is essentially the activities of Maharaj Priyavarta. And what we were discussing was Lord Brahma's convincing of Priyavarta. Right? So it was Priyavarta Maharaj leading a renounced life, following the instructions of his Guru Narad Muni, and Swayambhavu Manu being a little concerned, more than a little concerned, that there was nobody to rule the universe after the appearance of Daksha, Prajapati Daksha, the future Prajapati Daksha, who departs to perform austerities. So, he is conversing with Priyavarta, and Priyavarta is not very inclined to give up his renounced order of life. And then Lord Brahma comes, and from the 11th verse, Brahma starts giving instructions, and we notice that his instructions are not really asking Priyavarta to do something, but basically stating a point that important to follow the instructions of the authorities. In this case, Priyavarta's authority is Swayambhavu Manu, to some extent Lord Brahma also, but ultimately the authority is that of Krishna. So we did at the first 13th verse. We will resume from verse 14. And Sharan Prabhu, if you can do the translations.
Yes.
Yadvachitantyam gunakarmadamabi sudustarirvatsaviyam suyojitah sarve vahamo balamishwaraya prota nasiva dvipade chatushpada.
My dear boy, all of us are bound by the Vedic injunction to the division of an ashram according to our qualities and work. These divisions are difficult to avoid because they are scientifically arranged. We must therefore carry out our duties of Varnashram Dharma like bulls obliged to move according to the direction of a driver pulling on a rope, not to hit their nose.
Okay, we lost you a little bit. The last line is like.
Okay, you want me to read the last line? Okay. We must therefore.
Yeah.
We must therefore carry out our duties of Varna Ashram Dharma like bulls obliged to move according to the direction of a driver pulling on ropes knotted to their nose.
So the point that Lord Brahma is making is that the Lord engages everybody in his service, either directly or indirectly. The devotees, they understand the desire of the Lord and they engage in service. The jivas who are more interested in material enjoyment, they are engaged in the service of the Lord through the Varnashram Dharma. And those who are completely opposed to the Lord, they are engaged in a service through the law of karma. Varnashram Dharma is also to the law by the law of karma, but this is favorable, and that is that is not favorable. So here Lord Brahma is giving the example of how everyone is acting as per the desire of the Lord. So in the 13th verse of the 4th chapter, Krishna says, Chatuvarne Maya Sreshtham Gunakarma Vibhaga Shatasim Kartaham Apiyam Vidya Kartaram Avyara. He says that I am the one who created this Chaturvarni. So uh, Srila Prabhupada quotes from Vishnu Puran also saying that Lord Vishnu is worshipped by the proper execution of the prescribed duties of the Varna and the Ashram. So since Brahma is asking Priyavrata to follow his Varnashram Dharma, he is also reassuring him that even the Varnashram Dharma is an opportunity to serve the Lord. One has to be properly situated. Let's say when one understands that actually the Varnashram Dharma is also created by the desires of the Lord, then one can use that as much in the service of the Lord as any other situation. Um, uh, Srila Prabhupada makes this point that even though the Varnashram uh, is not by the basis of birth, but by the basis of gun and karma, one's own past life and propensity. One can also understand that one's birth is based on one's guna and karma. So based on one's previous activities, one takes birth in a Brahman, Vaishya, Shudra or Kshatriya family. And based on one's desires, guna. So what one is desiring. So that is why birth is also used as a proxy for guna karma. Because when a child is born, then it is difficult to determine either the guna or the karma. But understanding that the child is born in a Brahmanical family, one can discern that previous lives, the guna and karma has determined that birth. That is why there was focus on varnashram or mostly varna based on one's birth. This understanding needs to be accompanied by the fact that it is only indicative. Because if one's varna was completely determined by one's birth, then it basically negates the notion of free will. It negates the notion of nature versus nurture. So we see examples of personalities like Vishwamitra, born as a Kshatriya, became a Brahman. Drona, born as a Brahman, became a Kshatriya. Karna, born in a Shudra, became a Kshatriya. So one's varna can always be changed. But in the absence of any other, can you hear me? Okay, I'm getting this internet is unstable for some reason. So, but in the absence of any other indication, the notional indication is by birth. But ultimately, it is how one lives as per the scriptures. Prabhupada quotes 1623, Ye Shastra Vidimustrija Vartata Kam Karta Nasa Siddhim Avapnoti Nasukham Na Paramvatkatim. Like one who does not live according to the injunctions of the Vedas will never achieve success and will never be elevated. Srila Prabhupada says that the example cited in this verse is that bulls tied by ropes in their nostrils move according to the direction of the driver. Similarly, if you are moving according to the instructions of the Vedas, the perfect path for our lives will be set. Otherwise, if we do not move in that way, but act according to our whimsical ideas, our lives will be spoiled with confusion and will end with despair. Right? So, so as I mentioned, Priyavrata is the Kshatriya and a prince. So Brahma is subtly indicating that perfection for him is acting according to his varnashram. In doing so, he will also be serving the Lord. So he should not consider this to be a deviation from his path of bhakti. Now, interestingly, these instructions, they are a bit of a deviation from the general theme of the Bhagavatam that states that all the prescribed activities are subsumed within the acts of bhakti. And so many examples are given that one who takes to bhakti is automatically freed from all the requirements of serving the father, the family, the society, etc., etc. However, as we will see later on, that there is no actual deviation. Brahma is still considering bhakti to be supreme. So he's at this point instructing a person who is firmly situated on the path of bhakti. So he is not concerned about Priyavrata becoming materialistic. All that he wants Priyavrata to do is to also include the rules and responsibilities of his varna in his path of bhakti. Now these instructions become very similar, like Lord Vishnu instructed Dhruva Maharaj that you rule and then you go back to, you perform your austerities and then go back to Godhead. Or instruction to Karna Muni, first have a family life, then go back to Godhead. Or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed the Kurma Brahman that don't renounce everything. You stay in your family life, and in doing that, you will be continuously performing bhakti. So essentially, Brahma is elevating Priyavrata Maharaj from the position of Ekanta Bhakti to Yukta Vairagya. So far, Priyavrata Maharaj is by himself performing devotional service and is well situated in. But Brahma wants him to go to another level, that for the welfare of the other jivas, it is okay for you to take care of your own welfare. But for the welfare of the other jivas, now go beyond Ekantar Bhakti and enter into the position of Yukta Vairagya. Okay. So verse 15. Isha Vishtam Haya Avurandamahenga Dukham Sukham Va Gunakarma Sanga Asthaya Tatta Yadayum Tanatas Chakshushmatan Deva Niyamamanaha.
My dear Priyavrata, according to our association with different modes of material nature, the Supreme Presence of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must therefore remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Presence of Godhead, exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see.
So the point that was made in the previous verse is being expanded here. Previous verse, it was mentioned that Krishna is the creator of Varnashram. It is his will. Here, it is stated more explicitly that Krishna's hand can be seen not just in bhakti, but everywhere. even in the law of karma. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad explains that, that in the previous verse, the example of bulls were given, that they were led by the driver who was driving them. Now, the bulls may be treated well or not based on how the driver is. Like at least in India, sometimes you see uh, the bulls are used to carry loads, and they're very badly treated. The driver, he loads too much on the cart, and then on top of it, the person is mercilessly beating the bull. So, or sometimes the bulls, maybe if the owner is a kind owner, they may be treated well. So Priyavrta may make this point that the bulls maybe if you're saying that the perfection of the bulls is in following the guidance of the driver, but what if the driver is capricious? And Brahma says, not possible in the case of Krishna. So he gives another analogy in this verse to address this doubt, right? So as long as a blind man has faith in the guidance of the person who is seeing, he will be satisfied. Now, the person with the eyes may be holding the hand of the blind man and taking him. And then the blind man may complain that, why are you taking me on this path? There are too many thorns over here. Or the sand over here is too hot. Not knowing that there is another path which is even worse, which has even more prickly thorns, which is marshy, and where the person might slip and fall. So similarly, when the Lord is guiding a person, the path may appear to be not the most conducive path. But if the person has faith, then he will realize that the Lord is looking for his ultimate welfare. So Arjun wanted, the most conducive path was Arjun to retire to the forest and renounce everything. Krishna engaged him in fighting, which initially he looked upon as troublesome. But ultimately, it was for the benefit of everyone. Because Arjun had faith in Krishna. So Brahma is making this point to Priyavrata that you may think that giving up renunciation and engaging in family life is troublesome. But who knows, the path that you are following may be even more troublesome. So who knows? Krishna knows. So if you follow the path that Krishna is asking you to do, then regardless of whether the path is conducive or troublesome, ultimately it will be beneficial. Now, the message to Priyavrata Maharaj is that do not resent this responsibility being given to you because of your own past activities. So why did Priyavrata take birth as the son of Manu, as a Kshatriya, as a prince? It was because of his own previous activities and desires. The Lord is simply an instrument in delivering the result. And if you were to accept the order of the Lord, then his ultimate benefit will be assured. So the jiva, based on its own past association with the modes, it gets a body designed for a certain type of enjoyment and suffering. That's not the fault of the Lord. That is the Lord executing based on the jiva's desires and activities. But now what the Lord does is that based on that, the Lord will guide the jiva on a path that is most conducive for his spiritual emancipation. And that's where Brahma is saying for Priyavrata to have faith. that based on your own previous guna karma, you have now taken a birth in a royal family. You're a prince. You're supposed to rule. The situation has come where that aspect of your personality needs to manifest. And by trusting the fact that this is also equally potent way of serving the Lord, you will never be defeated. Um, so we see in the purport, so Priyavrta, Brahma, of course, is making arguments to convince Priyavrta Maharaj to perform his prescribed duty and rule. Srila Prabhupada balances it also. In the purport, he writes that the ultimate goals of one's life is to perform bhakti. Right? He says, under any circumstances, if we remain in the condition allotted to us by the Lord and follow his instructions, we will become perfect. Right? So this is the instruction of Brahma. Then he says the main purpose of the life is to follow the instructions of the personality of Godhead, which is Harir Nam, Harir Nam, Harir Nam Eva Kevalam. So Priyavrta is in a different position where he's engaged in bhakti and he's being asked to engage in his Varnashram Dharma. And Srila Prabhupada is preaching to people who are already engaged in Varnashram Dharma. So to them, he is saying that remain engaged in your Varnashram Dharma, but follow your Bhagavad Dharma also. And for the age of Kali, it is the chanting of the holy name. Okay. So we are now in verse 16. Mukto pitavad vibrayat swadeham arbadam ashnan abhiman shunya yathanubhutam pratiyat nidraha kim tvanya dehe gunate.
Even if one is liberated, he is nevertheless accept the body he has received according to his past karma. Without misconception, however, he regards his enjoyment and suffering due to that karma the way an awkward person regards a dream he had while sleeping. He thus remains steadfast and never works to achieve another material body under the influence of the free mode of material nature.
So Priyavrta Maharaj may object that the purifications of Varnashram Dharma are meant for those who are not spiritually enlightened, are meant for those who are bound by the laws of karma. So Brahma says that as long as one has a material body, it is an indication there is prarabdha karma. So the point that he's making is to Priyavrta that though you may be spiritually advanced, but you still have a material body, which means there is still prarabdha karma. So you should not consider yourself to be completely transcendental to it. So Lord Brahma makes this point over here that even if one is liberated, he nevertheless accepts the body according to the past karma. So one big question that isn't this contrary, that the whole notion of liberation is giving up the material body. Why would a liberated soul accept a body? So the difference is that not in terms of accepting a body, but in terms of acting on the bodily platform. So this difference is similar to Krishna explaining to Arjun in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that a conditioned soul will act according to the bodily platform. while the liberated soul will act according to the spiritual platform in a way that he does not get another body. A conditioned soul will be entangled in the enjoyment and suffering. But a liberated person, as Brahma mentions here, he regards his enjoyment and suffering due to the karma the way an awakened person regards a dream he had while he was sleeping. Which means, so what does the dream analogy mean? That you dreamt that there was a flood in the house and everybody was trying to frantically take the water out of the house. Now, when you get up, there's no flood. So the person is not going to go around trying to bail water out of the house because it's a dream. So similarly, a liberated person does not act according to the pushings of the karma or according to the swabha that is determined by the modes of material nature. But he simply will act for the pleasure of the Lord. So the point that is made here to Priyavrata is one, that you have a body, which means you have prarabdha karma. Now, having received this body, if you are in a liberated platform, you essentially use the body in the service of the Lord. Right? So he is negating both the possible objections of Priyavrata. Priyavrata saying, I am already a liberated soul, saying, not really. You have a body, so you have prarabdha karma. Now, factually speaking, there is two kinds of prarabdha karma. There is auspicious and inauspicious. So for personalities like Priyavrata or personalities like Srila Prabhupada, the body that is represented by the prarabdha karma is auspicious prarabdha karma. So in other cases, the body is using the soul, and in this case, the soul is using the body for the pleasure of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada writes a nice purport in this that Priyavrata might have thought that although a conditioned soul is forced to act according to the laws of nature, why should he, who is far advanced in spiritual understanding, accept the same kind of bondage and impediments to spiritual advancement? To answer this doubt, Lord Brahma informed that even those who are liberated do not resist accepting in the present body the results of the past activities. Then he explains the analogy of the dream and quotes Bhagavad Gita Yathat Karmanone Atra Lokanam Bandhana, that if one acts for the satisfaction of the Lord, the Yajna Purusha, his work does not produce reactions. A liberated person does not think about whatever he has ignorantly done in the past. Instead, he acts in such a way that he will not produce any body by fruitive activities. Okay, moving on to the next verse, 17. Bhayam pramatasya vaneshvapadishaya yata saste sahashat saptanaha jitendriyasya rater buddhasya graha shramah kim nukaroti avadyam.
Even if he goes from forest to forest, one who is not self-controlled must always fear material bondage because he is living with 6 co-wives, the mind and knowledge acquiring senses. Even householder life, however, cannot harm a self-satisfied, learned man who has conquered his senses.
So, so Brahma is further strengthening his case to caution Priyavrata Maharaj that he may think he is secure in the path of bhakti, but because he has not gone through the purification of karma, he may fall down. It's similar instructions in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about the dangers of premature renunciation. Two things Krishna talks about, right? First, he talks about Phalgu Vairagya, the dangers of premature renunciation. Then he talks about the need of even perfected souls to perform the prescribed activities for two reasons. One is that it will purify even them. And the second is to set an example for others. Right? So here, Lord Brahma is making the same point to Priyavrata, that do not think that you are secure in the path of bhakti and the path of karma might contaminate you. Actually, the opposite might happen. That while you're in the path of bhakti, you may fall down, and the path of karma might purify you even more so. So, the underlying point is that the fault is not in the execution of activities, but in executing the activities with the spirit of enjoyment. Right? So, one who is a Phalgu Vairagya, he may go from one forest to another. Different techniques to renounce. He may leave his family and his wife, but Brahma says that wherever he goes, he will always be accompanied by his 6 co-wives, which is the 5 senses and the mind. So what does a Phalgu Vairagya do? He is trading one wife for 6 wives. Right? And the dangers are even greater. It's spoken as a metaphor, but while sitting in the forest, if his senses are actively looking for engagement, then when the opportunity presents itself, the chances of his fall down are even much more stronger. So the proper thing to do is become renounced while becoming purified. Right? So in this situation, even the dangerous pit of household life will actually benefit. So Srila Prabhupada writes, gives various quotes from acharyas to make his point. He quotes Narottam Das Thakur sang this song, Greva Vanate Thake, that whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he is engaged in devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is a liberated person. And then Rupa Goswami says that regardless of one's circumstances, if one fully engages his mind, activities, and words in the devotional service of the Lord, he should be understood to be a liberated person. Prabodhananda Saraswati says the sense organs are certainly our greatest enemies, and therefore they are compared to venomous serpents. However, if a venomous serpent is bereft of his poisonous fangs, it is no longer fearful. So Prabhupada concludes that our first concern, therefore, should be to control the senses. But since the senses cannot be controlled unless engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, our important duty is to engage the senses in the devotional service. Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchyate. This is the verse of Padivini Mukta Tatpratvena Nirmala. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchyate. Bhakti means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. Okay, moving on to verse 18. Yaha sat sapatnan vijigeshamano graheshu nirvishya yate tapurvam atyeti durgashata urjitarina chine shukamam vichare vipaschit.
One who is situated in household life and who systematically conquers his mind and 5 sense organ is like a king in his fortress who conquers his powerful enemies. After one has been trained in household life and his lust desire have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger.
So Brahma was previously making the case that Privatmana should take to household life because it's the desire of the Lord. He also made the case that executed properly, household life is actually beneficial to the living entities. So there are many benefits to Priyavrta taking to this path. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that there are three kinds of people. They are the karmis who are without sense control. They are the yogis who are with sense control. And then there are the jnanis who are desiring sense control. So there is no fault in the karmis or the yogis in entering the household life. So if one is without sense control or with sense control, they can always enter the household life. Because if one is with sense control, then he will not be affected by the household activities. If one is without sense control, then the privileged activities that are done, the prescribed activities that are done will help the person get sense control. Now, what about the jnanis? So even if for one who is desiring to control the senses, even for that person, household life is recommended, since it allows one to engage the senses while training them. So Prabhupada says that the Vedic system of the four varnas and the four ashrams is very scientific. And its entire purpose is to enable one to control the senses. Right? So in every situation, with sense control, desiring sense control, without sense control, the Vedic system of the Varnashram is recommended if it is executed properly. Right? And above these three, there are the devotees who achieve sense control as a byproduct of their devotional activities. Right? So Privarta, of course, falls in that category, that he's like a yogi, but his sense control is not because of yoga, but because of his bhakti. The point is made that just like a yogi will benefit from following the varnashram, similarly, a devotee will benefit as long as it is done with the proper consciousness. Okay, so we'll do one more verse, and after that pause. This will bring us to the end of the instructions by Brahma. So then we'll pause for any discussion. Verse 19. Tam tvabhaja nabang saroj kosha durga shito nirjita sat saptanaha bhunkeshva bhoga purushat distan vimukta sangha prakritim bhajasva.
Lord Brahma continued, my dear Priyavrta, seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus of the feet of the Lord, whose navel is also like a lotus. Thus conquer the sixth sense organ, the mind, and the knowledge acquiring senses. Accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do this. You will thus always be liberated from material association and be able to carry out the Lord's orders in your constitutional position.
So this is the conclusion and also the summation of the instructions by Brahma. The previous verse talked about three kinds of people, the karmis, yogis, and jnanis. Brahma starts this verse with Tvam Tu. So Tvam Tu means but you, which indicates that Priyavrata doesn't fall in those three categories. Right? That for obvious reasons, he's a devotee. So Prabhupada mentions that there are three kinds of men within this material world. Those who are trying to enjoy the senses to the utmost and are called karmis. Above them are jnanis, who are trying to conquer the urge of the senses. Above them are the yogis who have already conquered the senses. None of them, however, are situated in a transcendental position. Only devotees who belong to none of the above mentioned groups are transcendental. So Brahma is assuring Priyavrata that you are not amongst these three kinds of people. So the two is the differentiator, but so the fort that you take shelter of is not like the fort that the karmis or the jnanis or the yogis will take. So when you enter the household life, you are essentially taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. It's so powerful argument that he's making for a devotee. The ultimate shelter is the lotus feet of the Lord. And Brahma is saying that, Priyavrata, for you to enter into household life is like taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Why? Because you are not like the others who have controlled the senses because they have given up the they have uh, uh, they have given up the object of the senses, right? So you are different from them because you have conquered the senses, right? There's a difference between renouncing the object of the senses and renouncing the desire for the object. So uh, 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 the point Brahma is making that even though externally their renunciation may look like yours, but the difference is that they have withdrawn the senses and given up the objects. You have given up your attachment to the senses. So even if your senses engage in their objects, you will not be implicated. For you, your six senses are your best friend, right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti writes in this purport boldly. He says, for Priyavrata, his six senses are the best friends. Why? Since they're attached to the beauty of the Lord, because they have a higher taste. So what is the recommendation then? That enjoy the objects given specially by your master. Enjoyment arising from karma is the cause of bondage, but not enjoyment that is ordained by the Lord. So the process is not of giving up enjoyment. The process is of giving up the enjoying mentality. In fact, what Brahma is saying over here, you should enjoy because the Lord is ordaining it for you to enjoy. And don't worry, you will not be contaminated because firstly, your present situation is one of detachment. And secondly, the Lord is always going to be your benefactor. If He is asking you to enjoy, then it is for your ultimate benefit. And then later on, you hand over the kingdom to your son and go to the forest. So Prabhupada writes that Prakritim refers to one's constitutional position. Every living entity has a constitutional position of being an eternal servant of the Lord. Therefore, Lord Brahma advises Priyavrata, be situated in your original position as a servant of the Lord. If you carry out his orders, you will never fall, even in the midst of material enjoyment. This is the synopsis of the instructions. So Prabhupada later on says the material enjoyment achieved by the dints of one's fruitive activities differs from material enjoyments given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? So firstly, the point is that bhakti by nature gives tremendous amount of enjoyment. So if you remember from the Nectar of Devotion, of the 6 symptoms of bhakti, 3 of them talk about enjoyment. Subhada, that everything is auspicious. Moksha Lagutagrat, that one is enjoying so much that the enjoyment or liberation is minimized. And uh, uh, what Visheshatma Sundaratma. Vishesha Sundaratma. I may have got that wrong, but basically indescribably condensed bliss. So firstly, the process of bhakti is that of enjoyment. One should not think the process of bhakti is that of neti, neti, neti. It's that of enjoyment. Now, if you're able to align your material engagement to the process of bhakti, then yes, that enjoyment is non-different from the enjoyment that you will execute in executing pure devotional service. Prabhupada then says the devotees of Krishna conscious movement are preaching all over the world in accordance with the order of Mahaprabhu. Therefore, they have to meet many karmis, but by the mercy of Mahaprabhu, they are unaffected by material influences. Okay, so let's pause over here. This is the end of a very powerful set of instructions from Brahma to an equally elevated personality, Privarta Maharaj. We can have some discussion on this.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I have a few questions. I don't know whether I can ask all of them. I'll just ask one. Here, the question is, Priyavrata did he really get advice directly from the Lord or only through Brahma? My understanding is only Brahma is advising him at present, right? And so, but then how do we know that it is the Lord's desire also? Because Narada Muni is giving the opposite, to take sannyas, to renounce. So the question is, how do we? Brahma is saying that it is the Lord's desire, but then we have our understanding is when Guru, a spiritual master, gives instruction, that we understand as a Lord's desire. Here, I'm not sure whether Narada Muni is Guru or Brahma is his Guru. Two conflicting advices he's getting. So how do we know which is Lord's desire in this case?
Thank you, Prabhu. We covered this, a very good point you made, and we covered this a little bit in last week's discussion, that Priyavrta is in the position where he's getting instructions from 2 personalities who are both in the position of his guru, and the instructions are conflicting. So how does he resolve it? So this is one reason why this particular set of verses are commented on so heavily, because they reflect practical situation where a person may get from an authority, a person established authorities, the person may get conflicting instructions. Second reason is that it also seems to go against the spirit of the general instruction of the Bhagavatam, that bhakti is supreme, give up everything. So for the first point that you have raised, we will see later on that when Brahma finishes his instructions, Narad Muni accepts the position of Brahma. So even though there's no explicit conversation, but in one verse, we see that Narad Muni is also very happy the way things are gone. So, and Prabhupada comments that when there are advanced, mature devotees, they may well give instructions that may contradict one another. At the end of the day, they will see what is it that is helping the person the most and the situation the most. So Priyavrat was in a position where he was taking care of himself, but not of others. And the instructions of Brahma put him in a position where he could do both. And Nagmuni accepts that. Right? So at least in this case, there is a happy meeting of the mind. So it's not that when Brahma gave his instruction, Nagmuni said to Priyavrat, don't listen to him. He's misdirecting you, right? Nagmuni accepted the instructions of Brahma. From a practical perspective, there is a situation where a person is getting conflicting instructions from authority. The need of having a Diksha Guru is emphasized. That is the person that resolves all confusions and contradictions. And as practicing devotees, all of us, I'm sure you have also had this situation where you wrote to Guru Maharaj saying, I don't know what to do. And this person is asking me this person is asking me this. I'm confused. And then, based on some back and forth, then the spiritual master will say, I recommend that you do this, which is why there is a reason to have the shelter of a living Guru. Because the scriptures can give you instructions, but they cannot resolve contradictions. Right? For that you have to have a living Guru.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's really very clear. I probably missed it last week discussion. I didn't catch it quite well. So this today very nicely done. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Prabhu.
think Saranga Prabhu has a question, so I will ask later on if he's.
Yes, Prabhu.
It's not a question, it's just a comment, because the Prabhupada said here in the purport that if one propagate the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's even over and above everything. And even what I understood here, okay, we are trying a little bit, but those who has taken risk like Prabhupada, many Prabhupada disciples, they just leave, everything and put their life on the line to make this movement goes on. And, this is amazing when Prabhupada is saying it here. That means they are over and above everything. No, this was just a comment, not a question.
Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, if you have Kishore, if you have any more questions, please go ahead.
One thing is, Prabhu, quite often I hear sometime a devotee, young devotee, who is not really in a brahmachari ashram or anything, but he's not married, and he approaches an advanced devotee, not necessarily guru, but an advanced devotee in the community, for advice, what to do. Should I get married or should I be a brahmachari? I've heard this a couple of times, that be a brahmachari, don't get married, that kind of advice. But here we see the opposite of, for Priyavrata. So a similar situation is happening here. I'm helping a young devotee like that. So it's kind of, I'm trying to ask him, what is your propensity? Feel like having a married life, even an inkling of it, then you should go for it. Now, don't prematurely be a brahmachari. So I don't know whether I'm giving the right direction, or those who have been giving direction like that in the past that I've heard, they are doing the right thing. Can you please shed some light on it? I know this is a specific question, but I'm just seeing whether there is any guidance.
Thank you, Prabhu. I would say exactly what you're saying, that depending on the nature of the person, there are different paths that are conducive. And especially in the present day and age, I would say there are very few people that are renounced enough to stay celibate throughout their life. So better for them to enter into Grihastha ashram and under the rules and regulations enjoy family life and execute devotional service than to enter into or decide to stay into brahmacharya ashram and then regret it later on. Prabhupada once said that um, if you fall as a grahastha, this was mostly to men. So if you fall as a grahastha, then your wife will protect you. If you fall as a sannyasi, there's nobody there to protect you. Right? So he was very, very particular, especially because he saw a bit of that happening in his own time. So unless the person is exceptionally renounced and detached, I think in the present day and age, that's what been my advice to almost anybody who has asked. I had a similar situation a few years ago where maybe a slightly different situation. The person was in a relationship and the relationship broke, and then the person was okay. And now I'm going to become a lifelong brahmachari. And then I was like, firstly, you're taking this decision at the wrong time in your life, and secondly, it's not suitable in the current day and age. So better for them to find hopefully a devotee match wherein the husband and wife can support each other.
Is there a room for one more question, Prabhu?
Sure, bro. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, taking
No
the time
worries.
over. Regarding the karma in the past, karma, based on that one gets a birth in the next life. There he's put in a particular ashram because based on the past karma. So there is a validity for birth as a determining factor for one's varna. But then my question is, when one gets a body which is suitable to fulfill the past impressions, so he associates with the guna which based on the past impression also. So his body and the guna and the karma both will be dependent on the past impressions. So then how does he get out of that cycle? It looks like an inescapable cycle. So how does he get out of it? What is that which makes one person to move forward? I don't know whether I'm clear in my question, whether I'm articulating it correct.
No, thank you, Prabhu. It's a good question. I mean, essentially, what you're elaborating on is the law of karma. So you're presently talking about it in the context of taking birth in a particular varna. How do you get out of it? But this is also the law of karma, that you do activities, you get conditioned to do more activities, whether they are brahmanical or whatever. So, and it feeds on itself. You associate with people based on their propensity. You develop the desire to do more activities. And again, if you remember the NOD cycle, that based on prarabdha karma, then kuta, beach, prarabdha, that cycle keeps going on. The only way to break that is the quick way to break that is to the path of bhakti. That when you execute bhakti, then at each of the stages in that cycle, it takes away the impetus, whether it is in terms of desires, kuta, whether it is in terms of bija, propensity, aprarabdha, even prarabdha, all stages, it takes away. Right? So that breaks the cycle. That's the potency of bhakti. And that's the quick way to cut that cycle. Otherwise, the cycle of karma, if followed properly, is designed to be self-terminating. Right? Even though it seems to be self-sustaining, but it is actually designed to be self-terminating. Otherwise, Krishna would not give that cycle of karma. And Gurujan Prabhu writes in Surrender Unto Me, he writes a small essay on this. That why does Krishna give karma if it is trapping? But if karma is followed properly, it dominates itself. Right? Like we were having this previous discussion, that if somebody has lusty desires, then they enter the grahastha ashram. But then they follow it with proper rules and regulations, so those desires get extinguished. So when they take the next birth, then those desires for the most part have been pacified. So by following the do's and the don'ts of the scriptures, the 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 pushings of the karmic cycles become weaker and weaker. It's a slow and gradual process, and it also has many pitfalls, which is why the path of bhakti is recommended. But ultimately, that's why it's given. The law, the path of karma is given not to bind the person to the material world, but to ultimately liberate the person.
So can we extrapolate it to a person who is not really following the rules and regulations, but just whimsically doing things, but according to his propensity, which is kind of a vikarma, or so that is also self-terminating. Can we extrapolate it to that too? I'm assuming that.
No, you can extrapolate it, but in the opposite way. Like just like karma is self-terminating, vikarma is self-propagating. So those who are following karma without rules and regulations, the whole purpose of the rules and regulation is that they pacify the desires. But if one is engaging in it unrestrictedly, then the example is given is like putting more and more fuel in the fire. So if a person engages into too much of unrestricted eating, then he'll be born with an animal body, and whenever he gets a human form, he will still be pursuing that desire of unrestricted eating. So for them, karma is binding, and for valid reasons, that they need to be in that stage when they execute karma from a liberating platform. But until that, it will continue to bind them. Until that, they are not qualified to be liberated.
That's what I was trying to ask you. One thing is, can we say, suppose a person is in karmic cycle, properly doing everything, and you said that it can be broken quickly by bhakti, right? So can we say there is a mercy of the Lord which comes into play, meaning through some level of, through some contact of bhakti or a bhakta, that is the only way it can happen, right? Otherwise, that bhakti component is very difficult to come by, unless one comes into contact with a devotee.
Absolutely. That's the potency of bhakti, that it can achieve in one lifetime what would probably take a million lifetimes, following the and possibly with, again, with all the dangers of fall down, etc. The process of bhakti, it is quick, because in that process, as you said, the mercy of the Lord appears. So no, it's no longer being subject to following rules and regulations. It is basically attracting the mercy of the Lord. And since the Lord is the owner of the modes, he can remove them, and he does that. You see that practically devotees become a lot more renounced in a very short period of time compared to others. Before I came to Krishna consciousness, uh, I used to associate with charitable organizations, and mode of goodness people. They want to do pious activities, but there is also this strong desire for recognition there. I remember they used to have like these very fierce fights that if a dignitary is coming, who will be the person giving the bouquet of flower? Who will be the person on the stage sitting next to them? All these people were well situated people. They were not taking any money. They were not stealing. They were giving their own money. They still had the desire for for some kind of recognition or fame coming out of it. Everybody wanted to be the president of this. So this was, I don't know if you know, in India there's a Rotary Club that's quite famous there. So to become the president of the Rotary Club, there's to be a lot of this politicking going on. So the modes in themselves little difficult to unwrap them. It's difficult, even though people may be charitable for long, long time. But if you see in the life of a devotee, very soon the person becomes detached from, I want to be the person in the Vyasthan, I want to be giving all the lectures, I want to be sitting on serving the main altar deities. Well, some of it that goes on, but the fact that there is so less of it going on, that itself is surprising. It's more by exception than right. Everybody is trying to put somebody else forward. No, you do this, Prabhu. No, you do this, etc. Right, and that itself is a big proof of how the Lord's mercy is able to reverse things that in other processes, not really sure when, how many lifetimes it will happen.
Mm. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice questions. Okay, so there's no further discussion. Let's continue. So I'll quickly summarize the prayer, or rather summarize the instructions by Brahma to Priyavrata. His instructions are 9 verses from 11 to 19. He starts off by making this rather bold statement, do not be envious of the Lord. And then he says that everybody, including great personalities, and he says, gives his own example, Lord Shiva and Manu, they follow happily the order of the Lord. So no one can become advanced enough, whether the person is advanced in education, austerity, piety, nobody can become advanced enough to ignore the orders of the Lord. Right, so this is in the first 2 verses, 11 and 12. Then 13 to 16, he makes this point that those who rebel against the orders of the Lord are bound by the law of karma, and still they are therefore bound by his rules, though indirectly through varnashram, even to the point of liberation. And then Lord Brahma assures that household life cannot contaminate a self-satisfied person, and renunciation is no protection for a person with material desires. So the conclusion is that the real protection is not in the ashrams or in the renunciation, but the real protection is in the lotus feet of the Lord. Therefore, and this is the unsaid conclusion, my dear Priyavrata, you should simply follow the desires of the Lord and rule the planets. So, this is interesting in the sense that there is no conversation that happens over here. Right? So, Priyavrata does not ask for any questions. Brahma instructs, and Brahma, being supremely intelligent, in his instruction, he incorporates what Priyavrata would have asked. So if you look at the flow of it, as we had discussed, he incorporates that Priyavrata might object that I'm already in the renounced order of life. Why do I need the purification of varnashram? What if I get contaminated in the household life? What about how will I reclaim my devotional life once I emerge from this? So he anticipates all these questions, and then he addresses them in these set of instructions. So as I mentioned before, very practical instruction given by the CEO of the universe. So the CEO has management responsibility, right? So there are some who are philosophers, there are some who are analysts, but the CEO needs to bring everything together to make the company viable. And that's what we see Lord Brahma doing over here. Okay, so this is the end of the instructions. Now we move to verse 20. And again, this is prose, no meter over here. Shri Sukuvacha iti samhito mahabhagavato bhagavatas Tribhuvana Gurur Anushasanam Atmano Lagutyatuvanta Sridharo Badham Miti Sabaho Manam Uvaha.
Sri Shukadev Goswami continued. After thus being fully instructed by Lord Brahma, who is the spiritual master of the free world, Priyavrata, his own position being inferior, offered obeisances, accepted the orders and carried it out with great respect.
So, 16 verses from verse 20 to 35 will describe the rule of Priyavrata, his descendants, and activities. So, what did Priyavrata do after Brahma instructed him? He offered obeisances, considering his own position inferior. So, there are three kinds of seniorities. There is seniority by age. Older people are generally given respect because they're old. There is seniority by initiation, that if one is initiated earlier on, then person is considered to be senior. And there is seniority by realization, that if one person is advanced in spiritual realization, then is considered to be senior. So Priyavrata Maharaj by age, he was the grandson of Brahma. So Brahma had that seniority. And in the mood of a humble devotee, Priyavrata, he rightly considered Brahma to be more advanced by his realization. And of course, Brahma was initiated at the beginning of the universe, the creation of the universe. So from all aspects, Priyavrata considered his own position to be inferior. And he accepted the orders and carried it out with great respect. So Prabhupada says that Priyavrata was the grandson of Lord Brahma. Therefore, according to social etiquette, his position was inferior. It is the duty of the inferior to carry out the order of the superior with great respect. Priyavrata therefore immediately said, "Yes, sir, I shall carry out your order." Priyavrata is described as a Mahabhagavat, a great devotee. The duty of a great devotee is to carry out the order of the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that whether Brahma was superior both in terms of age, he was a grandfather of Priyavrata. He had the position of being the guru, and he's famous for his spiritual realization. So Prabhupada says the devotee of the Lord always considers himself a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. So here we can also maybe reflect a little bit on this dynamic between following instructions and not following instructions. So if you remember in the third canto, when the four Kumaras refused the order of Brahma, then Lord Shiva appeared from the eyebrows of Brahma. And Lord Brahma, the 11 Rudras, so they asked Lord Brahma, how can we serve you? Different from what? The four Kumaras. Four Kumaras were not interested in serving you. The Rudras were different. That how can we serve you? And then Brahma gave them 11 Rudranis, 11 places to live. What did Brahma say? You create progeny. And the Rudras, they very enthusiastically followed the order of Brahma. They created so many progeny that they were filling up the universe. But the progeny were created like the Rudras. And the nature of the Rudras is to destroy. So the offsprings of these Rudras, they started creating havoc in the universe. to the point that they even wanted to kill Brahma. So then Brahma approached the Rudras and said, you please stop. This is the time of creation. And you are there to destroy. So you go, you perform meditation, chant Hare Krishna, wait till the time when the destruction of the universe will happen, then you do this. And the Rudras, they circumambulated Brahma, they said, okay. And they went and are performing austerities, right? So Lord Shiva, he said, I will follow, right? They did not say that you gave me a service to create progeny, now you're taking away that service and you're not happy with my service. He simply said, so be it, I will follow. Similarly, after the Rudras, Brahma created the 10 sages to increase the population, but then he noticed that was not happening. They were not sufficiently populating the universe. So he was dissatisfied with their service. Then he created Swambhavu, Manu and Shatrupa, and from them the Prajapatis came and they were able to successfully populate the universe. So we see over here that when one is given a service, then the service needs to be according to the nature of the person and also appropriate at the time. The 4 Kumaras were given a service that was not according to their nature. So they rebelled. The Rudras were given a service that was not suitable at the time. The Rudras were for destruction and they were given a service to have progeny who would destroy. So it was not appropriate at that time. The 10 sages were given a service, but they were not able to do it properly. So what is Brahma doing constantly? He is looking at the service. He is looking at how suitable the person is to do the service. He is looking at how suitable is the time for that service. And based on that, he is constantly adjusting. So we see that at the creation of the universe, we see that in an ongoing engagement also. So Brahma is, as I mentioned, the original manager of the universe. This is what our spiritual masters are doing. This is what the temple president is doing. This is what Srila Prabhupada did. The famous example of 2 sannyasis coming to Prabhupada saying, we have just received the sannyasa ashram. One Prabhupada says you travel and preach, the other says you stay in the temple and worship the deities. So the expertise of engaging one in the service of Krishna is multidimensional and multifaceted. So there are some instructions that are foundational, that are given to everybody, chant Hare Krishna, follow the regulative principles. But then there are other instructions that need to be adjusted based on what the swabhav of the person is, what the need at the time is. And ultimately we see Brahma has succeeded. So he had some false moves, right? With the 4 Kumaras, did something, did not work out. With the Rudras, did something, did not work out. 10 sages did something, did not work out. But he succeeded because he was constantly able to adjust. Okay, moving on to verse 21. Bhagwan api manuna yathava upakalpachita priyavatana hridayora vishmam abhishami kshamanyor atmasam avanatham avan manasham kshamyam avartham pravartyan nagamat.
Brahma was sorry. Lord Brahma was then worshipped by Manu, who respectfully satisfied him as well as he could. Priyavrata and Narada also looked upon Brahma with no tinge of resentment. Having engaged Priyavrata in accepting his father's request, Lord Brahma returned to his abode, Satyaloka, which is indescribable by the endeavor of mundane mind or words.
So here we see that how do Mahabhagavats come together. Narad Muni was instructing Priyavrata to renounce everything and take to just simply Ekanta Bhakti. Manu was trying to engage Priyavrata into ruling the universe and not succeeding. Then Brahma, as the highest authority, he intervened and corrected. But because he did it so masterfully, everybody was satisfied. Right? So it says Priyavrata and Narad looked upon Brahma with no tinges of resentment. Lord Brahma was worshipped by Manu, who respectfully satisfied him. So the three personalities were potentially at some kind of a conflict with one another. And Brahma comes and resolves it in a way that everyone is happy. And the reason he was able to do that, because he showed that the path that he is recommending is for everyone's benefit. In this case, the path of following the instructions of the Lord. So it was for the benefit of Priyavrata, for the reasons we saw, that he would attract the mercy of the Lord, he would get an opportunity to further purify himself. It was for the benefit of Manu, because as we see later on, that Manu is interested in doing what Priyavrata is doing now. Manu is interested in renouncing. Now for Manu, it makes sense because he's been ruling for a long time. Right? So he cannot do that unless he has somebody capable taking on the rule. So that's why Manu is happy. Narad is also happy because he understands the instructions of Brahma. Narad's only interest was the welfare of Priyavrata. So everybody is happy over here. So Prabhupada says that although Brahma had forced Priyavrata to accept the management of worldly affairs, thus breaking his vow to remain brahmachari and completely engaged in devotional service, Narad and Priyavrata did not look upon Brahma with resentment. Narad was not at all sorry that he had been frustrated in making Priyavrata a disciple. Therefore, instead of looking upon Brahma with resentment, they very feelingly offered him respect. Okay. So I'll do one more verse and then any concluding thoughts? We can have a discussion. Manurapi pranevam pratistha manoratah surashi varunamit mitenatmajam akhildhara mandal sthiti guptaya आस्थाप्य स्वयंमति विश्वविश्वविश्वा जलायस्या उप्रारमा.
Swayambhuva Manu, with assistance of Lord Brahma, thus fulfilled his desires. With the permission of great sage Narada, he delivered to his son the governmental responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. He thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires.
It's interesting that Sukadeva Goswami, in the previous set of verses, had been glorifying this engagement of Varna, Ashram. here he writes it that he thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So the the way that it is reconciled is that for Manu, this was the right time to do it. For him to continue to stay as a ruler would expose him to the dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. So his renunciation is being glorified because he's doing it at the right. We also see that Manu, with the permission of the sage, Narad. So it's not that Manu is not saying to Narad that, okay, now I won, you lost, I'm the winner. But he's still taking permission of the sage, Narad. So he's following a very advanced level of etiquette. That we see how Mahabhagavats are dealing with one another. There is, regardless of whether there is agreements or disagreements, there is an enormous amount of respect that is given in all situations. And so Prabhupada is glorifying this timely renunciation by Manu. So he says that the word Surarshri Vara Manumatena is significant. Narad entrusted the government to his son with the permission of the great sage Narad. This is particularly mentioned because although Narad wanted Priyavata to be free from material affairs, when Priyavata took charge of the universe by the request of Lord Brahma and Manu, Narad also was very pleased. Right? So Narad did not have any possessiveness about this is my disciple, he should only follow my instructions. All the personalities, Brahma, Manu, Priyavata, Narad, they are all united with the single purpose of serving the Lord. And so any disagreements are always amicably resolved and for the benefit of everyone. Okay, so let me pause here, see if there is any concluding thoughts.
Hare Krishna. The last statement you made is kind of little perplexing, that if Manu continues beyond that point that that was appropriate to take sannyas, he may fall into the material pool. So that is that a principle that everybody has to follow? That the reason I am asking is, my understanding is once you have done all these as a service, you get purified, and so not taking sannyas is an indication that he's attached. Is that what it is? That's what is pulling him down. We will pull him down.
To a great extent, yes, because if you remember that we are talking about personalities in a different age where taking sannyas was or renouncing, it was a logical step in the devotional advancement. Right. So Prabhupada later on makes this point of Devi Varnashram, that it's not that that devotees don't need to take sannyas. Prabhupada doesn't say that. I'm extrapolating from that, but it's not that devotees don't need to take sannyas; they forever stay attached. If you remember in the last chapter of the fourth canto, Srila Prabhupada over and over again makes this point of the need of the devotees to follow Varnashram also, and especially in the context of when the time is right, they should detach themselves from family affairs. At one point he says 50 years. Another point he says is that when the sons are grown up and the family is taken care of, but that point is repeatedly made. So when the time is right, when the person has been sufficiently purified by the execution of their varnashram duties under the restrictions of the the rules and regulations of bhakti, then the person should move to the next stage. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions?
Just one word in the purport, they said like Raja Rishis, no? Even though they are rulers, but they are also Rishis.
Raja Rishis. Yes, Trupad makes the point. Thank you. Okay, nothing more. We'll end over here. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.